dialects. And as you see, there's acute need of presentations about dialects, because dialects is not really a topic that is very there's an animal about so dialects are not very present in the consciousness of language learners, and I think not even in the consciousness of polyglots, only some illuminated polyglots. Still, I will try to hold a key for preserving language diversity. We'll talk, the next half an hour, we'll talk about what a dialect is. Then we will discover whether dialects differ from standard varieties, and finally we'll look at how we can contribute to preserve dialects. So, language versus dialect. There is a famous quip by Max Weinreich. It's a Yiddish linguist, and this quip dates back to 1944, which says, Sprach ist ein Dialekt mit einer Armee und Flot. I think I don't have to translate. A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. And paradoxical as this may sound, there's something true to it. Think of there's something true to this equation. Think of Latin. At the beginning, it was spoken here, somewhere in middle Italy, and then it was spoken in a huge territory ranging from Great Britain to Persia. Think of Arabic. At the beginning, it was spoken by some nomadic tribes here in the Arabic Peninsula, and then it spread all over northern Africa, the Orient, and also to the Iberian Peninsula. Think of Castilian. At the beginning, it was spoken in the north of the Iberian Peninsula, and today it's spoken in America, in Africa, in the and also in Asia. Or think of English, a descendant of the language spoken by those tribes that the Romans called barbarians, is now spoken on all continents, and it's an L2 for billions and billions people. And it also made it on the moon. So, how did this happen? Those dialects had, in principle, an army and a navy, and they conquered great territories, and in this way the language spread to other continents. The other way round, we may say that a dialect is a language with no army and no navy, and we have examples for this too. Think of Ukrainian. For more than 2 centuries, Ukrainian was denied the status of a language because it was Ukraine was under the domination of Tsarist Russia, and a number of ukazi, circulars and decrees were published preventing the publication of textbooks, of school books in Ukrainian, because Ukrainian was actually a dialect. Or think of a Norwegian. Norway was under the domination of Denmark until 1814, so a pure Norwegian language could not arise. The official language was Danish, and when Norway became independent, then a pure Norwegian language arose, and the consequence is that today we are puzzled whether we should learn Bokmål or Nynorsk, that is the old official standard, the Danish with some Norwegian elements, or the new standard, Nynorsk, based on Norwegian dialects. Okay, let's try to summarize this and go the etymological way. So dialect, lect is a way of speaking. Dia means throughout. So dialect is a way of speaking throughout a region, throughout a small, restricted territory. And from this equation, it follows that a dialect is sort of a linguistic variety which is not independent. It has no army, it has no navy, and it's simply not autonomous. It is dominated, or it is ruled by another variety which we call the standard variety. We may represent this as you see on this on the screen. At the top we have the standard variety, and then we have regional and local dialects, like a pyramid. So the language would be the whole pyramid, and dialects, local dialects, are the basis of this pyramid, whereas the standard variety is at the top. So when we say that we learn German or French or Japanese, we actually learn only this variety, the standard variety, but we don't learn, usually don't learn dialects. Well, you might ask yourself whether what came first, the egg or the chicken, the standard variety or local dialects. Since dialects are usually regarded as something as a sort of incorrect ways of speaking, or vulgarized ways of speaking, we may think that the standard variety was there first, and then the dialects were born as sort of a corrupted version of the standard variety, but it's not true. It's just the other way round. The standard variety arose as a result of a mixing of different dialects, or out of the dialect of an important town. Okay, so what do you think when you think of endangered languages? We usually think of languages spoken by people who looks like this, who live in New Guinea, or in the Amazonas region, or in Indian reservations. But actually, endangered dialects are spoken by people, or were spoken by people like this, peasants. So, I'm not saying that those languages are not endangered, but that there are varieties, linguistic varieties, which are endangered, and which are much closer to us, to our daily experience, than those languages. And it would be nice if we may preserve both those languages and our dialects. Okay. What would we lose if dialects were lost? We would lose a part of the pyramid, and then another part of the pyramid, and we would be left with the standard variety. So a language would be only the standard variety, and all the dialects, everything underneath the standard variety would be lost. But here's the question: does the standard variety actually differ from dialects? Yes or no? We'll try to answer this question, and we'll provide some phonetic, morphological and syntactic examples, but to get an impression, look at those two sentences and find the differences. The first sentence is in Milanese, it's the dialect spoken in Milan, and the second sentence is in Standard Italian. So the first sentence sounds like assomiglias le adre fa, and the second sentence is non so che cosa sta facendo. So try to make out whether they are the same thing or not. I highlighted the corresponding words with the same color. So it seems at first sight that they are not really the same. But let's see some examples. The sound system. Italian has 7 vowels: I, E, L, A, O, O, U. So as you see in these vowel charts, Milanese has 2 more vowels, U and Ö, 2 front-rounded vowels. and they do not appear in borrowed words, but in core vocabulary, like in vieux, in que, pedrieux, ruf, skul, misun. So this is quite of a pretty significant difference if you have two vowels more than the standard variety. On the other side, let's look at German. German had lots of vowels, among others the whole series of front-rounded vowels, ü, ö, but if you go to Stuttgart, you will hear Swabian. This is the dialect spoken in the region of Stuttgart, and you won't hear there können, müde or über, but können, mir and über. That is, Swabian has not these front-rounded vowels. Just the other way, Milanese and Italian. Okay, let's travel to Poland. Polish is such a difficult language. We heard in the talk before this. It's very difficult. It has a lots of fricatives, affricates, s, sh, sh, z, sh, sh, ch, sh, z, sh, sh. It's all the way around. But some of the Poles get annoyed with this and got rid of one sound for each pair. So you only have in Masovian and Masurian dialects s, sh, z, sh, z, ch, and the z. So in this area, in this orange area, you may hear, instead of shia, jaba and chas, you may hear sia, zaba and sas for neck, frog and time. Let's go back to Germany. In central and northern Germany, Low German dialects are spoken, and they are phonetically quite different from Standard German, because those dialects didn't undergo the second consonantal shift. Consonantal shift made out of p, t, p, t, k, ts, k. So if you compare words in Low German and Standard German, you will see that they look and sound much more like Dutch and English than Standard German, because in Dutch and English there was no second consonantal shift either. Okay, let's go to form of words, to morphology, pronouns, and try to compare pronouns, personal pronouns in Standard Italian and in Milanese. If you look at Standard Italian and Milanese, you will see that the system in Milanese is much simpler, because it's simply more consistent. All inconsistencies that are found in the Standard Italian system were wiped out in Milanese, and you only have one series for subject and object pronouns. But there's something more to it if you compare verbs, the inflection of verbs in Standard Italian and in Milanese. You see that in Milanese there are some elements before the verb. Te cante, el canta, la canta, and these elements, so the elements that are not bracketed are not optional, they are obligatory. So the translation of sings in Milanese is not canta, but el canta or la canta. You cannot leave them out. And the joke is that when you have a subject, you still have those pronouns before the verb. So in Standard Italian, you have lei compra le uova, Maria compra le uova. In Milanese, instead, you have lei la compra gli œufs, la Maria la compra gli œufs. So these elements are not dropped, even if a subject is present. And this is not an idiosyncrasy of Northern Italian dialects. You also find them in Dutch dialects. So the corresponding sentence of Standard Dutch, als je gezond leeft, zul je langer leven, is als gij gezond leeft, zul je langer leven, with doubling ge and gij as a clitic pronoun and a tonic pronoun.
Sorry, which dialect is this?
I don't know. I took it from the atlas of the Dutch dialects, but I unfortunately I didn't record the place. But I can look up and tell you if you like. Sorry. So verbs. Slavic languages are known for not having, for not displaying a so-called possessive perfect. A possessive perfect is verbal tense formed by the have and the past participle of the passive, like the Spanish he comido, I have eaten, Italian ho mangiato. So those two sentences in standard Russian do not contain any possessive perfect. Lisa umysla kuricu, tvoj papa sažal birjozu. Still, if you look at northern Russian dialects, you do find a kind of possessive perfect. The corresponding sentences would be ulisitsi unisino kuračka and ubatski tvojevo saženo biljosku, where you do have the past participle of the passive, and you also have the corresponding form of to have, which in Russian is at me, is not I had, but at me is. So at fox is stolen chicken means the fox has stolen the chicken. And in northern Russian dialects, you also find a peculiarity which is not found in Slavic languages usually. Articles. They are only found in Bulgarian and Macedonian in the south, the south of the Slavic area. But you also find them in northern Russian dialects, where you have dom, ot, žena, ta, silo, uto, and curiously enough, they are postposed just like they are postposed in Bulgarian and Macedonian. Okay, two phenomena concerning syntax, negation and possession. Negation, we may divide languages into European languages into three groups according to whether negation is preverbal, like in Italian, non so, non sei venuto, or Bulgarian, ne znam, ne si došel. Circumnominal, like in French, je ne sais pas, or tu n'es pas venu. Or postnominal, like in German, ich weiß nicht, du bist nicht gekommen, where the negation appears after the inflected verb. Still, in dialects, you may happen to find a different position of negation. Back again to Milanese, negation is not pre-nominal, like pre-verbal, sorry, like in standard Italian, but post-verbal. Assono, te sei venu no, or assominga, te sei venu minga, te sei minga venu. In Bulgarian dialects, you may find, instead of a pure pre-verbal negation, circumverbal negation, like in neznamki, nesidoshelki. And negation seems to be quite a moody phenomenon. There are languages where which prescribe double negation. You have to have two negations in a sentence when you have a negative pronoun, and languages which prohibit double negation. So in Italian, you have to say non so niente, non sei mai venuto, or whereas in German, have to say ich weiß nichts, du bist nie gekommen, and forms that do not correspond to this sort of rule are simply incorrect. So you cannot say in Italian so niente sei mai venuto. You have to put another negation. And the same in German. You cannot say ich weiß nie nichts or du bist nie nirgends gekommen. But these forms are just those that we can find in dialects. In Milanese, once again, you can say asso niente or te sei mai venu, where you only have one negation, and in German dialects, you may have two negations, like in und habe nicht nirgends keine Stelle bekommen, and I got no job nowhere, with two negations. Last phenomenon, possession. We may divide languages into two groups according to whether the possessor comes last, like in Spanish, el coche de mi padre. Mi padre is the possessor and it comes last. Or German, das Auto von meinem Bruder. or languages where possessor comes first, like Turkish, Anemin Chantasi, my mother's bag, or Hungarian, Apapana Piros Tsipoye, the Pope's red shoes. And English takes an intermediate position because you can have the roof of his new house, but also my mother's bag or the Pope's red shoes. Well, in dialects you may find structures which you don't find in the standard language. So, for instance, in Slavic dialects, in Russian you have possessor comes last in the standard variety, sistra mojewo mужа. Instead, in dialects you may find the opposite way, mojomu tu mужу, sistra. The same in Macedonian, instead of majkamu nacarat in standard, you have nacarat majkamu. And in Alemannic dialects, spoken in southern Germany, you have, instead of die Großeltern von meiner Mutter, which would be standard, von meiner Mutter ihre Großeltern, or instead of the Bruder vom Jäger, you have dem Jäger sein Bruder. Okay, so if we come back to the original question, do the standard variety and the dialects differ from each other? Well, we may say, to some extent, yes. And this answer is important because if this is so, then they are varieties which they own right of existing and they own right to be spoken and learned. So what can we do to save the dialects? We have in Europe a precious instrument, the European Charter of Regional and Minority Languages, but unfortunately no dialects except for Low German are listed among the languages protected by this charter. And this is really a pity because in a globalized world like ours, the key word for being present is visibility. If something or someone is not visible, then it doesn't exist. So what can we do to keep dialects visible? Well, if you are a native speaker of some dialect, you may practice it, you may use it in your daily life with people who understand your dialect, of course. You may also collect data or text or recordings so that the dialect is not forgotten at all. And you may collaborate to different projects to preserve it. For instance, and at the Humboldt University in Berlin, a project was started to record the pronunciation of different Italian dialects. Or you may write text in your dialect. Each one of the major Italian dialects has an own section in Wikipedia. This is the homepage of Wikipedia in Lombard. If you're not a native speaker of a dialect, then you may learn some basics, and you have the possibility to learn at least some basic of Innsbruck German tomorrow or on Wednesday. On Wednesday, then you may practice what you learned, and the very minimal condition to be fulfilled is that you are aware of their existence. Thank you. So, I was very, very quick. So there is more time to...
Let me break the answer to the question. What do you think about this proposal? Some argue that let evolution go its own way, and if something has to go extinct, let it be extinct. Like, I mean, even animals and plants go extinct regularly because of our human activity. So why not in our human society, if the supporters of the dialect go out of fashion, or they're just being overtaken by a much bigger force, why not just let it go the natural way? Why fight it? So what's your stance on this? You of course you argue that we save the dialects, but is it not something like against nature?
I would like to give the word to... Yeah. Oh, you would like to answer his question?
Yes.
For...
Yeah.
Then I will give an answer to
anyone.
So
I'm just raising the issue.
My first I only want to say like one thing to that, and that's, are people aware that we're losing dialects? And that would be the first important thing. My father, for example, spoke a dialect. Then he moved to, from his island to Sweden, to the city where I was born. And he stopped speaking his dialect because people didn't understand it and laughed when he spoke. So in a way, it was correct because there are more economic opportunities if you lose your dialect. And so I would say, okay, why should we keep people in their peasant state or not having economic opportunities? But the most important thing to start discussing this issue would be to make people aware of we are losing the dialects. And I think that would be a point to raise first before we decide should we invest money in it or not, would be to make people aware of this. That would be my first issue.
Yeah, we are talking about it exactly today.
Yeah.
But the Welsh, for example, Welsh, you know, in Great Britain.
It is protected by the ECR.
Yeah, that's it. But even the Welsh themselves, they think, well, I just use it at home. But economically, it's useless. So again, it's a general question that if naturally something happens, why are we fighting it? Because we are fighting it. We are trying to save something that wants to die. It wants to die.
Would you like to say something?
Yeah. Well, I was going to actually. I was sort of thinking of applying, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to end up talking about endangered languages. That's not really what we're talking about. When we talk about something like Welsh, it feels like it's kind of starting to talk about endangered languages rather than dialects, because there's not like some standard Welsh which is spoken by like 500 million speakers, and it's just like, oh, it's only the other Welsh which is dying. It's like an entire language which is endangered. I mean, basically, I just want to give one counter example, which maybe will bring across my point, which is like most of the languages of America, we just let them die, and we lost like thousands of years of history and great cultural wealth and linguistic wealth because of that. So I mean, I don't really. If I had some influence, I would have said, stop killing everyone who can write this language, which has been in existence for 1,000 years of literature or whatever.
But even if you don't kill them, they die naturally. People just get die.
But they have children.
You're convinced.
No, I'm trying to zoom out and see that the people who speak these languages, they are biological beings, and if they don't make any children, then they will die out. Sorry for them. And I like diversity. I prefer diversity to non-diversity.
It's not like that.
But
my parents and my grandparents spoke a dialect, and they had children.
Yeah.
So, but it was another reason that dialects at some point, for mainly political, social, economical reason. So it was not a sort of natural decision. It was decided that they had not to be cultivated, to be preserved, because they were sort of
inferior. They were seen as inferior.
Right. And
lower status.
they didn't help people to get access to culture. The culture was and is represented by the standard variety. So people had to cease speaking dialects and learn the standard variety, so they may have access to culture, to economics, and
survival of the fittest. It's a kind of economic
and
evolutionary principle.
When saying that a dialect is dying out, it's not because that dialect is somehow inferior. So to say that it's like animals dying out, it's not because the dialect itself is inferior. It's because the economic situation of the group of people is that because of social factors, economic factors, then the dialect dies out. I think actually by letting dialects die out, you're really because often people who speak a dialect are people who are already disadvantaged in society. So to say that, oh, well, it doesn't matter if it die out, by doing that, it's a very regressive policy, because you're actually continuing and reinforcing the difference between the more, because the prestige dialects often spoken by the more affluent, and dialects spoken by the poorer. So if you keep encouraging the prestige dialect, you're encouraging people who are already better off in society. So I think if you want to talk about economic effects, then I think saving dialects can really have very positive, progressive effects on society.
Also, there's a common false analogy because of with evolution, with sort of biological evolution, because people sometimes use the word language evolution to describe language change. They use the word evolution sometimes, because in some ways it is similar to biological evolution. However, some people take this quite far, or kind of because they understand natural selection, they think that basically the languages undergo natural selection. That there's a variety of languages, and then the ones which are not fit or not suited to their surroundings will die out. And that's not really. I mean, there's not really any reason to think that that's the case, because even if there is, because the rate at which languages and the amount at which they vary compared to the rate at which they can die is. We had to talk about this at one point.
Darwin himself was mortified by the phenomenon of social Darwinism, which already became apparent in his lifetime.
Sorry, yeah, I sort of got
I think the point is that the languages change so quickly that when languages die out, this tends not to be because the language is quite inferior, because people speak so much. As a person learns a language, it becomes good enough to communicate very quickly.
Yes, certainly. I don't want to imply that any language that dies out is inferior to another language. It could be, for example, Esperanto, a genius language. It's the best language in the world. But if the Esperanto speakers, I have an annual meeting and hit by a bomb, and all the Esperanto speakers by just accident die out, and nobody can teach it anymore, all the books are burned by accident, then imagine that it's a genius language disappearing from this planet. I'm not saying that the died out language is inferior in any sense. Of course, I don't compare like that. But I'm just looking at the natural things happening in the world.
Natural, and we must agree about what is natural. So if it is something that is decided on a political level, would you call it natural or not?
No,
because on a political level, you may also have decided
a futile or not. I mean, I like to fight, but I only like to fight when I know that I will win. If I have no way to win, then I say,
I think we have an Austrian perspective on this.
Yeah, what I wanted to add to a natural decision. For example, just because a language is standardized doesn't mean that it reflects what people actually use every day. Because, for example, my dialect, from a linguistic perspective, is much more modern and more adapted to people's needs of a language than the standard German. For example, we don't use any genitive, and this is coming through in the standard German as well. Why? Because we don't need a genitive anymore. We found ways to express it, and for us it's not economic anymore to use a genitive. But people think just because the standard German still uses genitive, this is correct, this is high language, but actually my dialect, or many other dialects, is much more natural, because we now, in 2014, I don't need a genitive to express that I am the daughter of my father. I don't need it anymore. So actually my dialect is much fitter, much more adapted to the circumstances of my life, of the time we're living, and so I think it's not a very natural process to let dialects die, or it's not that you let them die, it's more that you say, oh my god, this is Dudendeutsch, this is standardized, somebody says this is worth being in a dictionary, this is worth being standardized in a grammar, but yeah, who is this person, and how can he decide that something is standardized or not? And sometimes these standardizations are 20, 30 years late, and people actually are already advanced in their daily talking, and just because it's not standardized, it's not known everywhere. But actually, yeah, I talk in real time when I talk, and I talk how I need to talk today.
I think we have three questions, 1, 2, and 3.
I see it from a learner's perspective. I have some standard Danish, but I have spent a lot of time learning some Scots, and I've made videos in Scots, which I've forgotten again. And I have learned Platt German, and I've got books in my luggage right now in Platt. But you can only learn a language if the local representatives of that are proud of their language and writing, make video Wikipedia page thing, and if they don't do that, then I say it in the hard way, then it deserves to die from my standpoint.
It deserves.
It deserves to die because then it is not worth studying from me. And then if it has no value from me, whether they continue to speak it, if they're not proud of it enough to make it the public, there are of course external pressures. If they're kept out of television and things like that, then it's an injustice, and I fight that any way I can. But if they don't even care to write a book or a magazine or anything, then why should I do anything to save them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So, going back to your dialect, where are you from, by the way?
I live in a small village near Innsbruck, which is compared to the word, a very small city in the west of Austria.
Okay, so I don't generally agree with you. The genitive is not necessarily less convenient than the dative, which you are actually using with preposition. It consumes more time. We had another question in another talk here. How did the cases come to be? I don't generally agree with you. It might be that you find it easier because you learned it like that and because you use it like that, but I personally find the genitive easier. It's not used, I'm from Stuttgart, by the way.
Okay.
It's not used in Schwaben. It's not used, not at all, but I think the genitive is actually quite useful if you want to condense what you say.
Yeah,
why don't we reintroduce the ablative into German then?
I like that.
What is the dative the genitive sign tool?
Yeah, that's because we're replacing genitive points for the dative. But I think it's not because we just want to eliminate a dative, a genitive, and we want to, of course, a pronoun or a preposition is another word we have to say. But I guess it's in general a tendency to reduce forms, and so we have some kind of declination, as every learner of German knows, like the articles. But there's a tendency to reduce different forms. It's just because we also economize the usage of the language, and I think that's a natural process. It's not because we want the learners to learn it faster. Also for us, we also have to have these forms in mind, of course, not consciously. But there is a tendency of people, and it has been throughout the years. Why didn't the soldiers of Rome speak High Latin? Because it was too complicated, and they found ways to make speaking easier. And that's, I think, what we do unconsciousness. Yeah, you know what I mean.
But actually, I mean, a lot of language change is, you can't predict it. It doesn't necessarily come from a need to economize things. I mean, often it might be from speakers saying things in a lazy way so that you lose endings, that kind of thing. But I think trying to compare a standard variety with a non-standard variety by saying one's more economical than the other, I think is to some extent missing the point, because any dialect, no matter whether it's standard or not, people can communicate in it, otherwise it wouldn't be a language. So it will be economical enough to communicate. And I think trying to decide, for this grammar point or this grammar point, which version is slightly more economical, I think that kind of thing we can leave to people.
Yeah, let the people decide.
Let people decide. Don't try to, we don't want to prescribe. Everyone should use the genitive or should use the dative.
But one variety is actually trying to be
Yes,
prescriptive.
I think that's the problem.
The competition is not a fair competition, because there is at least one variety, the standard variety, which displays a special status, which is stronger.
The competition is never fair. I'm just telling you.
Competition is
that's why there's competition.
If we compare it to
unfair word.
so we can make it fairer, I think.
We can
Sorry,
try.
there
We
was
can try to make it
a
fair.
question here.
I want to expand on the point that you made about learners of dialects. Some time ago, I moved to Vienna, and walking around speaking very pristine Hochdeutsch, and I feel like a little bit foolish sometimes. But there aren't really resources to learn Wienerisch.
True.
It hasn't been systematized. It hasn't been written. About 40 years ago, they had something on state TV called Ein echter Wiener geht nicht runter, and it was in dialect, and it was scandalous. People were like, what are you putting this on TV for?
But also the content. A lot of cliches represented in this serial, and the dialect is not the most important message of this
I
series.
think in this series, the dialect is also shown as the language of
The workers.
Yeah,
workers
and
of the kind of population with very low in the society, and who are and no one wants to belong to this group. So because of this, also in Vienna, I think the dialect is seen as something inferior.
And this is also a difference between Vienna and the rest of the country. Whereas in Vienna, you know, who's going to speak dialect? The guy who comes to clean the carpet or to unstop the toilet. These guys speak dialect. You know.
But actually, everyone does.
But everyone knows it.
In some extent. So, for example, I use dialect, but maybe not as strongly as the program you mentioned. But a fact is, I think that a dialect is often closer to what people are feeling. You can say what you feel much better in dialect.
It certainly denotes an informal situation.
Yes, and that's why, so most people, or let's say, for example, in Austria, people who speak dialects, they can also speak standard language. So dialects you speak at home with the people you are close to. So, and then to them you tell how you feel and things like that. And then at work or in official situation you use the standard language.
And yet, outside of Vienna, everyone speaks it and everyone is proud of it. And it's actually a really beautiful thing. I fell in love with Austria because I fell in love with Tirol.
Thank you very much. Actually, in my situation, it's quite different because I use the dialect everywhere in the country. When I'm talking to a policeman, because I can speak to it, I talk to him in dialect. And usually my dialect is closely related to the du form. And so we often used to do.
There's some amazing pragmatics behind it. I could tell you lots of stories about when you switch to a dialect with an official, all of a sudden things become easier because the situation is no longer.
Because everybody feels home with it.
You're an endangered species. You know, they consider, oh my god, a minority.
And yet.
No, it's more of an in-group thing. They belong to my group.
It's
an in-group out-group thing.
Well, if the policeman...
This is also a problem, though. There are no resources to learn any of these dialects, and these groups are essentially closed.
There is one volume of the codified series that you mentioned. There is one for Finnish, but it's not very extensive.
There's a dictionary, I think. Language has a really good dictionary for Deutsch.
Then there is
dictionaries with charts, there's nothing systematic, there are no lessons.
Sprechen Sie Wienerisch? Do you know that? There's a larger book, it's called Sprechen Sie Wienerisch. So it's more like a dictionary. So.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to show products, if this is going to I will give full credit. So in preparation to my presentation, which is on Wednesday, I hope, I bought das Radio Tirol. Radio Tirol is a radio channel in Tirol. Das Radio Tirol Wörterbuch der Tiroler Mundarten by Hans Moser. And it's amazing.
Would you please say that in Tiroler Mundarten?
Okay, ja, also Ihnen ist das Wörterbuch mit dabei. Das Radio Tirol Wörterbuch der Tiroler Mundarten von Hans Moser. Und das ist eigentlich ziemlich stark, weil du hast da ein komplett, also ein richtig dickes Buch über keine Ahnung wie viele Wörter drin sind. Und er hat alle Wörter, die eigentlich im Tiroler Dialekt ausgesprochen werden, drinnen, also Wörter, die ich überhaupt nicht kenne, weil sie anders toll oder so nennen, und habe nachher eine Erklärung auf, zum Beispiel, das war ein super Wort, geschert, ein Adjektiv. Und zwar, und jetzt die Wortherkunft, Partizip Perfekt vom Mittelhochdeutsch scheren, which means scheren oder abschneiden, was bedeutet scheren oder abschneiden. Und die heutige Bedeutung stammt aus einer Zeit, als Bauern kein langes Haar tragen durften. Und was heißt das jetzt auf Deutsch? Also geschert, ungehobelt, grob, provinziell, dann auch Kollokationen, geschert daherreden. Ich verwende das persönlich sehr oft, also ich sage das total oft. Nachher, das darf man, gell? Und nachher noch die Kollokation «Akscherter Hammel», ein Mensch mit schlechten Manieren. Und ja, also, natürlich ist es jetzt leider Wörterbuch, man muss schon ein bisschen etwas kennen, aber zumindest ist es ein Beitrag dazu, dass das irgendwie erhalten wird. Und es gibt noch ein anderes Wörterbuch, das ist schon älter, das ist ein bisschen wissenschaftlicher, das ist jetzt mehr für Liebhaber und...
Ich finde es urleibern.
Ja, urleibern über mich gar nicht. Und ja, also das ist halt auch gerade Beitrag.
Sorry, there was a last question maybe.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to say that I'm living in Zurich in Switzerland now, and originally I come from Germany, so now I have to try to get used to listening to understanding Swiss German, and
good luck.
Huh?
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm trying, but it works. Yeah, I think speaking Swiss German myself is much more difficult. But I wanted to say that, especially in Switzerland, you said that in Austria, people usually speak Austrian to each other. I mean, you said the dialects, yeah.
Certainly outside of Vienna, yes.
Yeah.
Also in Vienna, but then that's an in-group thing.
One thing, don't confuse Austrian Standard German with dialect.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true, that's something very different.
Yes.
But in Switzerland, it's maybe even more so that everyone speaks Swiss German, their Swiss German dialect, like Zurich German and Bernese. They always speak it with each other. When I'm on the street, I can never hear standard German except from foreigners. And for myself, I have to admit. Yeah, and I sometimes when I speak with like in the drugstore or in the supermarket, people talk to me in Swiss German. I can sort of understand it. I mean, like 90% right now. And I wish I could answer in Swiss German as well, because I always feel like a foreigner, like really a foreigner, and I think, oh, sorry, I have to speak Standard German, and then I speak Standard German. I could have the choice to speak my dialect, which is Saxon, from Upper Saxon, from Leipzig.
So why not try?
Yeah, I could do so, but like Swiss German dialects in Switzerland have quite a high prestige, even a higher prestige than the standard language. But in Germany it's the opposite, mostly. Maybe not in Swabia and southern Germany, but especially in Saxony. If you speak Saxon, you are regarded as a low-class person, and I can speak both standard German, which I usually speak, but I can also speak Saxon German with my parents and with my friends, and if I imitate people or if I just speak something funny, then I speak Saxon German. And I wonder if, I mean, this, not superstition, this prejudice, yeah, this prejudice might not exist in Switzerland. They have probably maybe never heard Saxon German, so I might be able to speak Saxon to them, and they might find it cute or nice dialect.
And in Austria, it would seem that this doesn't exist outside Vienna. It's very highly valued.
But a point on Swiss German is that it's not standardized, and the writing isn't standardized either. There are lots of texts in Swiss German, but they're all different and they're all written differently, which is fine. But there are courses for people speaking standard German to learn Swiss German. Yes, a friend of mine from Sweden lives in close to Zurich, and she could go to one of those courses. The problem is she doesn't speak standard German.
Wow, cool. Do you know where, like Migros Clubschule? Or
I have to look it up. I knew it before, but
interesting.
And there's one course producer, I don't know, I think in Pimse or Reception, I don't know, but they have one Schweizerdeutsch.
Kauderwelsch.
Yeah.
But
the Kauderwelsch ist nichts wert. Kauderwelsch sagt nicht genug, es zu lernen. Als habe ich schon recht nicht gelernt.
It's for the beginning, it's too...
But I'm reading like a course with coursebook and audio. I don't remember which brand, you can find it on Ellen's website. I found it there. Haven't tested it, of course, but yeah.
And another, well, not problem, but another issue that I have is if I really I want to learn Zurichdeutsch and I want to speak it, but in the beginning, of course, I will speak it wrongly. And if I learn Spanish and I speak Spanish wrong at the beginning, it's no problem. They will understand, they will help me, they will accept it. But with dialect, it's a little bit different.
Yes.
If someone from Bavaria comes
Yes.
comes to me and wants to learn Swiss German, of course, Saxon. I feel flattered. I think, oh, cool, yeah, someone wants to learn Saxon. But if they kind of imitate the dialect, it's not
mocking.
right. It always sounds strange. And
It feels mocking.
yeah, it feels like mocking. And I'm not sure if the Swiss German feel the same way. So I'm a little bit, I hesitate.
No, the Swiss German don't.
We have got exactly the same
For
problem
them,
with
the
the
Swiss
Swedes.
German is basically a protection against foreigners. Okay, so that's how they try to protect.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't think you can say that for everyone.
Frontalier.
They also want me to learn it. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them.
But the Germans are in a really awkward position because if you learn Swiss German, it's normally fine, unless you're a German, and then they seem to split 50-50. 50% say it's offensive and they shouldn't do it, and the other 50% say they're living here, they ought to do it. So,
Exactly.
so I don't envy your position.
Whatever you do is wrong.
That's my impression.
We have exactly the same situation in the Scandinavian countries. If I go to Göteborg or to Malmö, I try speaking Danish first, and I only speak Swedish after they have declared they don't understand me. Because otherwise I was telling those people they are stupid when they can't understand Danish. So I try out a couple of words and then I can see them if they go blank, and then I speak Swedish, and not the same before. And then the alternative would be to speak English, and I've refused to do that.
Okay, so it's 5 o'clock. Thanks a lot for the discussion. It was much more interesting than the talk. And I think there is yet
The talk fostered the discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing the topic on the table because it's so important.
You're
and
welcome.
it's really great.
Thank you.
Job